LinkedIn is like a very amazing database of potential. So people can find you really easily on there by just doing different search queries. And so what you really need to remember with that is you want to make sure that your profile has the right keywords so that people can find you.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of BizBuzz. Lee and I are excited to be here with you today. And today we're talking about the much loved and perhaps little known about LinkedIn. It seems like it's the big brother of some of the other social media channels out there. It's a little bit more serious and not as much of the social, playful, post your dinner for content. And so we're going to be talking about that today a little bit more strategically, how you can use it for your business and potentially your career as well. And what are some of the top strategies that we see are working with LinkedIn. As I say, we've been talking a lot about it recently. I've just done a podcast with Leslie Hughes, who is a social media expert and specializes in LinkedIn. So we've got some great takeaways from that today. And also we've been talking about that within our Business Accelerator program as well. And the members there have been having a chance to go deep into LinkedIn and ask some more questions. So Lee, I know that you're a fan of LinkedIn and have a deep knowledge in it as well. Why don't you give us a little bit of an overarching viewpoint or comment on LinkedIn and why we should be using it perhaps as a starting point?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the first question you have to ask yourself is, who is your audience in terms of like who you want to connect with in building your brand. So, if your audience is young, maybe just out of school or maybe even in school, perhaps, LinkedIn isn't going to be where you're going to be fostering relationships. But if you are a B2B business or you are looking for a new opportunity within your career, there's just so much tapped in, so much possibility and so much to tap into. So I think that the first thing to start with is taking a look at your profile and making sure that reflects you. So, if you have a picture of yourself from 10 years ago and you don't look anything alike that picture, then perhaps it's time to do some tweaking of your profile and realize that LinkedIn is like a very amazing database of potential. So, people can find you really easily on there by just doing different search queries. And so, what you really need to remember with that is you want to make sure that your profile has the right keywords so that people can find you. Like, think about it as, like website SEO, right? Where you're like, you go in and you put in keywords into your website so that you come up more on Google searches. Well, LinkedIn is the same. So, if you're going to use it, you got to make sure that you've really optimized your profile. And as you mentioned, Leslie Hughes did such an amazing job of the rundown on what makes an excellent profile.
Yeah, for sure. And, like a couple of things that you've talked about there, and Leslie says this as well, fish where the fish are. So, I think every piece of social media plays a different role, and it is always important to know who your customers are. And one of the distinctions that Leslie made, I think, which was interesting in the podcast, was that some other social media is about spending time on social media, and LinkedIn is very much about investing time in social media. I think most of the times you won't find people just going for an afternoon of mindless puppy video watching on LinkedIn. They're really there for a purpose. So I think the why is definitely important. And then, I think you raise the next great point is because it is a bit more of a professional platform, showing up a little bit more professionally, still authentically, but I think it's just an extra level of polish. It's less casual perhaps than your Instagram or even your Facebook profiles.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the thing is that sometimes we have this tendency to want to be efficient and repurpose our content. And that's fine. But, first of all, you don't want to go posting the same message everywhere, especially if your people are following you across platforms. It's a little boring. And you want to make sure that the relevance is really there. And I love what you mentioned about like making sure it is professional. Like I have seen a lot of people in their profile pictures wearing sunglasses, or fitness people with no shirts on, and it's not the type of look that, even though it may represent your brand, I think there's more savvy ways to do that so that you aren't messing with the credibility of the platform. So yeah, really taking a moment to think about what type of content is going to serve your community. It's not just about you, it's about your community, right? So if you're fostering those relationships, then you want to share stuff that's relevant to a professional network.
Yeah, and we started to talk about, just in terms of cutting edge strategies, a little bit more professional, that professional photo. There are a lot of features on LinkedIn, and that's part of the conversation we've had. We'll get to sort of lead generation strategies and connection strategies in a minute, but that what I discovered, because I'm not a heavy LinkedIn user, because a lot of my clients are not on LinkedIn, they're a bit more creative, they're a bit of a younger demographic, they're hanging out a little bit more on other platforms. Not to say that there's not a lot of clients on LinkedIn, but what I discovered is there's a lot of functionality on LinkedIn that I didn't know about, both in the free and the paid options. So I think the things like, just in terms of a bit of a secret strategy, is the keyword strategy, and thinking about that in your profile, in your about section, in your experience section, really using those and thinking about it more as a database and a search feature. It's what I said initially, is that people, if they're investing time, going to LinkedIn for a more specific purpose as a general rule.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that just taking a moment to familiarize yourself with some of the key benefits. So there's two types of profiles that you can utilize. So there's the creator profile. So that's for someone who wants to treat it, let's just say, a little bit more like the typical social media, where instead of connecting with someone, they can actually follow you. And so it's a great way to amass more followers, but you still want to be able to connect directly to the people that you think are, you want to be able to like search that database, right? So keep that in mind. And so some of the features when you turn on the creator platform is that you get to use a LinkedIn newsletter. There's the blogging that you can do. So perhaps if you're just starting out and you don't have access to a lot of tools, or maybe you don't have a branded website yet, there's certainly ways that you can use LinkedIn to write articles, to share your thought leadership, to even have a newsletter on there. So the other thing that we talked a bit about was, whether or not you should accept connections from people that you don't know. And what's your thoughts on that, Natasha?
So I think that it's an interesting question, and I do accept connections from people I don't know, but it depends how the ask is made. And this is always, I think, the real balance / dilemma with a platform like LinkedIn. And I think people, unfortunately, have, like all of the platforms, once people realize that you could use it as a selling technique, how people approach was very different. When I started using LinkedIn many years ago, it was more in my professional corporate career. And I found like LinkedIn was more like a business card, right? So people were just really making connections to say, hey, I'd like to expand my network. Maybe in the future, if I'm looking for a job, or you're looking for a job, or I'm looking for a talent, it'd be great to have you in the database, right? So it was more like that. Now, Lee, I think you see it as well. Like every connection is a sales connection. And as a coach and consultant, like every connection almost I get in LinkedIn is someone who wants to sell me marketing services or VA services or whatever, right? And so it just becomes cluttered up. So to answer your question, would I accept connections from people I don't know? Absolutely, because for me, that's the same as going to a networking event where I don't know people and making a connection. I think one of the strategies that we really discussed, which I think was useful is, you know, this is not about big numbers on LinkedIn. And again, there's different lead generation strategies to this, but it's not about how many followers you get in my mind. It's about really good connections. So where I think it can be valuable is, you know, someone makes a connection and they say, hey, I know Lee, I know you're working with Lee, I'm doing XYZ. I just wanted to reach out and say hi. You know, maybe there's an opportunity to chat or say hello or find out a bit more about each other, right? I mean, you can't have coffee dates with everyone who joins you on LinkedIn, but I think if you can kind of tap into that, who do you know? And that's why you're making the connection, that's valuable. And if you don't know someone, maybe saying, hey, Natasha, or hey, Lee, you know, I read your article about, you know, using LinkedIn strategically, or I saw your video, I really enjoyed that. I'm looking to grow my business through LinkedIn, or I'm a social media manager and I use LinkedIn a lot. Sounds like we've got some interesting connections, would love to stay in touch. That would be a more comfortable connection for me that I would say yes to, versus, hi, I saw your profile, I see you're a coach, I offer the ABCDFG services. I'm like, well, good for you, right? I don't know who you are. I don't know what quality you are. I get 17,000 messages a day like that. I just am going to delete that, right? If someone makes a sales pitch to me right out of the gate, I literally am blocking them. So that's my point. What about you?
Well, yeah. So let's just talk a bit about so we talked a bit about the do's, and now let's talk a bit about the don'ts.
Yes.
So I would say, don't send a connection request and then after that person accepts it, instantly start trying to sell them something, especially if they're a financial advisor. I can't tell you how many financial advisors have, like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just feels so uncomfortable. And then I just reply back, no, thank you. And then if they gets a little more pushy, then I just block them. Like, right. It's, you know, and I'm pretty careful about who I select now to connect with. I mean, I always have been, but I think even more so now that LinkedIn is getting to be more popular than it was in the past. Yeah. You know, I don't want to have those awkward interactions. And so I think people should just stop doing that. Stop trying to sell someone who you know virtually anything about, and they know virtually nothing about you. And you're going to try to enter into a conversation where you're going to talk about finance, like your personal finances. Like, no, not going to happen. No way. So to all people who connect with me, don't do that. it's just, I feel bad. I feel bad having, because I know how hard everybody works on their business, and, you know, I hate to put people off, but at the same time, like, yeah, no, unless I reach out to you and say, I'd like to know more about your financial services, that's one thing. But yeah, I don't need to get, like, you know, 2 or 3 messages, especially like what happens is you get one, and then if you don't respond, then they send it again a couple of days later, and that really starts to feel like spam. Yeah. So that needs to stop. The other thing is, it's not a dating site. So, like, don't, you know, men, women that are on it, like, let's not try to use it. It's not speed dating. It's not a place where you're, you know, it's not meant to make people feel uncomfortable. I've experienced that as well. So that's another don't. What don'ts do you think are that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be very much on board with both of those. You know, I think again, I think it's more of a do or you know, a way to interact. It's the same way that you would act in an in-person networking meeting, right? Again, like on Instagram, you're following people, people don't have to accept, you know, there's no gate there where you have to accept that, allow that person to follow you, right? People can follow you depending on what kind of account you are. So I think it's more about like a networking event. You're not there. If you're in a live networking event, you wouldn't just be handing your business card to everyone. You'd be saying, hey, hi Lee, I'm Natasha. I'm a business coach, you know, and nice to meet you. what brings you out here today? How can I help? Is there anything I can help you with? Again, like if I'm a financial advisor using this, and by the way, sometimes it's not the financial advisor, they have a lead gen company that's behind that, which are very scripted and kind of cookie cutter and not too personal.
Right.
But, I would just say, hey, Lee, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm a local financial advisor in the area. I specialize in insurance or whatever.
Yes.
I'm just building my network here. If you or anyone you know is ever interested in exploring, needs help with that, let me know. I'd love to chat with you. So I think it's more about a do, because I think you've covered the don'ts. It's like, think about that, it's like, how would you start that conversation in a real physical environment with people? I mean, you wouldn't just go up and say, hey, I'm a financial advisor. Tell me all about your financial situation.
Yeah.
No way. And particularly not online, with poor financial advisors, we're being a bit, singling them out. It's not only financial advisors, but, I'm not going to give all of my, I don't, from a recipient of that, is don't give people all your information out of the gate. Don't tell them a bunch of personal information about yourself before you even know who they are or who they're connected. And I think Leslie gave a great strategy when we were talking with her. Her response to kind of like a random was like, oh, hi, thanks for connecting. I'd love to know, how did you connect with me? How do we know each other, or how did we connect with me, or kind of what's the purpose of your connection, right? So there is sort of language that I think we can use and get better at using to filter that out. And yeah, I mean, I agree, like as any of the tools get more popular, and as I say, as they go from this was once a networking tool to this is a hardcore selling tool, the dynamics change dramatically, right? And from a LinkedIn perspective, it tended to used to be more about career network and workplace, less about entrepreneurship. Now the entrepreneurship is growing. That's just my perspective. That might not be true or not, but that's just my perspective of that. And the last thing I would say is don't, and I'm with you, a lot of my connections come from my corporate life. And I don't want all of those connections being spammed and people saying, oh, well, like now they're connected with me, some random person, and then they're speaking to like the CEO of, X big company. It's like, I'm a friend of Natasha's. It's like, well, no, you're not actually. Just because I'm connected with you doesn't mean that we have that level of detail. So I think you do need to be considerate of your network as well. It's almost like a bit of a public email list. You know what I mean? You wouldn't let random people just spam your email list, and you shouldn't be just connecting with any old person if you think they're going to spam your connection list.
Yeah, like if I find if I get like data generation people, like sales people, I'm very careful, and I'm looking to see who else are they connected that I know. But one little tip actually that I did a few years ago is you can actually change the settings in your LinkedIn profile so that no one can see who you're connected to. They can see the amount, but they can't actually go and like click on and see those. So that's what I've done. Because I'm very conscious that I don't want anyone who knows me to think then that they can like, do exactly what you said, like, make a sort of what I guess you would call a false introduction.
Yeah, and agreed. And I think there's a really fine line between, that's what I think the distinction between LinkedIn and other platforms are. What we've talked about LinkedIn is trying to add more functionality, so it's more like the other social media channels. But in my opinion, LinkedIn is not a social media channel. Social media is social, right? Now, again, it's being used in different ways. It's an online channel for sure. But in my mind, I wouldn't use LinkedIn as a social media channel, if you will. But again, I think that's going to evolve over time. People are getting so used to seeing all of the other social media channels be used from a more business perspective. And then there sort of becomes an expectation or a conditioning almost that if you come on LinkedIn and it's not engaging and there's not fun videos and pretty pictures and all of that, people just don't want to stay there. So there's sort of, I think there's a bit of an evolution happening on LinkedIn, how that manages to retain its integrity of being more this professional network will be interesting to see over time.
Yeah, and they've introduced features and then I think they try them out and then realize, this doesn't really make sense. So for example, they had stories. So similar to Instagram stories, you could do the pretty much the exact same thing on your phone. So, that's another little strategic tip is, there's certain capabilities that you can do on your phone. Now stories is gone. So again, like talking to what you said, I think they realize that people don't want to utilize it like they would in Instagram, right? So they've taken away that functionality. Another strategic little tip is LinkedIn has a great help. So you can do LinkedIn help in your messaging if you like type that into the search engine, or sorry, into the LinkedIn messaging database, and you can ask questions. So for example, say you want to go on LinkedIn Live and you haven't been approved, right? So I know, you mentioned that you had an application and you haven't received word whether or not you can use it or not. So you can actually send them a message and ask for an update on where things are at with your application. And they're so responsive. I always get a response within 24 to 48 hours. So very different than say Facebook or Instagram where they are horrible, beyond horrible customer service.
Yeah, amazing. Lee, we're about 20 minutes in today. I mean, this is not a tutorial on LinkedIn. As we said, it's more of a strategic level. And I think we've covered some really interesting points today. I think the profile piece is probably standard and most people have heard that before. But I think some of the really strategic things are the search engine functionality here. I love the tip about the help desk. That is so different from any other platforms. Potentially, you've got a bit more security on LinkedIn. I could be wrong in saying that, but I haven't heard as many horror stories, LinkedIn, people's profiles getting hacked and things like that. So there is a bit more security on that. I don't know. Is that true? Am I just making that up?
No, I think that's true. I mean, I've had issues occur. Well, as you know, my Instagram horror story, I still haven't got my profile back. But yeah, and Facebook, I've many times hacked. But no, I've never come across anything with LinkedIn. So that's really good. Now, you have to be careful what you do with LinkedIn, because sometimes if you send too many LinkedIn requests or do different things, they can give you warnings and whatnot. So that's something to keep in mind strategically as well.
Yeah. So I think, just as a general rule, it's a great tool. It's a really powerful tool. It's amazing for thought leadership kind of work and really posting high quality, good content to position you as an expert, a little more than, just the fluff that you see on everything else. You can go a bit deeper. I love the article posting opportunities on there. And yes, really to show up as a thought leader. I think when it comes to connecting, there is some etiquette. And I'd say that etiquette is at a little deeper level than perhaps it is on the other social media platforms, in terms of really establishing why you're connecting, how you're connecting. And again, I mentioned, we'll not go deep on it, but I have some colleagues that do use lead generation companies. They're definitely looking for bigger contracts, so they're approaching companies with bigger contracts and, bigger information. They are making a little bit more of an ask earlier on, but in more of a way of stating is like, hey, we're calling from XYZ company. We specialize in ABC services. They're targeting companies. We specialize in working with manufacturing companies. After looking at your company, it may be an interesting fit. If you'd like to have a conversation to explore more about whatever that is, then let's set up a time. So they are kind of doing a cold call outreach, but it's not just a spam outreach, right? It's very targeted. It's very targeted, almost advertising. And so the ask becomes a little more specific, right? It's not as long as like it's just a one-on-one connection and we're warming up. It's like, hey, you know, we think this could help you, and if you want to jump on a call with us, then let's have it. Please book a time, right? So they're giving them the opportunity to do that.
So I think in wrapping up, I think we've really established that you can use it in a very strategic way, and it can be extremely helpful for those of you that are job hunting. I can't think of a better tool that you can be using to check out who's hiring. Or, the other thing too is that as a person that's looking for work, right? We're at this time in the market, the job market, we really have so many opportunities. So do your research on companies and make sure that they're living their values, right? So if they say they're a diverse company, check out the people that work there and see if that really is true to, maybe their employment promises.
Yeah.
So with that, I guess we'll wrap up. And
yeah, absolutely. And if anyone wants to go a bit deeper on LinkedIn and hear more about what Leslie Hughes had to say about using LinkedIn, you can check out my podcast. It's on Your Business Without Borders. It's also on my Instagram, and it's on my website, inspireanddrive.com. So that's another great resource, and absolutely reach out. Lee is very skilled in LinkedIn. If you've got any questions, send her a DM. Yeah, and I agree. Like, I encourage people to use LinkedIn. It's an amazing tool. It's potentially not a market that's completely saturated right now. So I think when used strategically, it's a great way to get in front of your ideal audience and build your credibility as a thought leader.
Well said. Well said. So if you have any questions that you want answered, as Natasha said, you can DM myself or Natasha. If you have questions about our business accelerator, please feel free to send Natasha Mitchell a message on LinkedIn. And last but not least, this is a LinkedIn Live. So if you want to put your thought leadership in there about how you think you can be more strategic with LinkedIn, please feel free to type in the chat and hyperlink myself, Lee Mitchell, or Natasha Mitchell. And we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Absolutely. And we'd also love to hear your other ideas for other future BizBuzz and conversations that you'd like to join in with us and have us debrief. So thanks everyone for joining us. A great, interesting conversation. Thank you, Lee. And we'll see you again next week. Bye.
Bye, everyone.